When Alberto asked me about the title of my intervention for today, I immediately thought, well, the adolescent girl, now you see, now you don't. And the reason, in fact, when one reads the excellent background paper for this conference, the paper attests to that. It states very clearly that there is little systematic knowledge on the real lives and exercise of rights by adolescent girls beyond valuable testimonies, very good anecdotal evidence, and some of the research that, in fact, today we have heard. This is why I think that this conference, which is trying to stimulate research and thinking to place the adolescent girl in the center of concern among a community of practitioners and academics, is so valuable. And I thank you then for the invitation in the name of the Committee of the Rights of the Child and in my own name. My working hypothesis, in fact, has been validated throughout the whole day, I think, is that adolescent girls suffer from a double invisibility: gender and age. Of course, this double invisibility is multiplied depending on the context, such as poverty and ethnic origin and disabilities and others. But when they emerge, the adolescent girls, when they emerge out of this invisibility into the public sphere, it's really as a problem, not as a state of normality, not as an asset, as we heard today so many times. On the gender issue, we would all agree that the gender issue is beginning to disappear, I think, as a factor of invisibility. The strong women movement in the world has opened the way for concern on the girl child, which started early in the 90s. Indeed, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, which I am a member of since last year, decided as early as 1995, let's remember that the committee started working in 1991 only, so as early as 1995, it decided to hold a day of general debate on the girl child in order to contribute to the World Conference on Women in Beijing. This decision was based on the evidence that had already accumulated with the committee on discrimination and neglect coming out of the examination of state parties' reports up to that moment. And its earlier general debate, the committee's earlier general debate on economic exploitation of children, and on its contribution, the committee's contribution to the International Year of the Family in 1994. The committee's assessment at that point in 1995 was, and I quote, that the place in society of girls and women in general raised serious and unresolved questions of inequality and indifference manifested by discrimination, neglect, exploitation, and violence. It further stated, quote, that there was a need to ensure that a woman's life cycle would not become a vicious cycle, where the evolution from childhood to adulthood would be blighted by fatalism and a sense of inferiority. You could not say it stronger, I think, and especially at that time. It concluded, the committee's assessment, it concluded that the Beijing Platform of Action needed to place the human rights of girls at its core. And this assessment was confirmed at the World Conference on Human Rights that took place also that year. In turn, UNICEF devoted a great deal of attention at that time to its own initiative on the girl child, as did many others. Only last year, and it has continued, and only last year, the UN Secretary General presented a report to the General Assembly on the girl child, reviewing global commitments and policy developments, and focusing especially on female genital mutilation. So you see, there has been some attention and some movement on this, but these calls for attention and further progress over the years, despite of this, in many countries of the world, prejudice, discrimination, economic factors, poor statistics still make it very difficult for girls to be objects of policy, let alone subjects of rights. To this we attest every day in the committee and in other human rights bodies. More recently in the Human Rights Council, which held a full-day meeting, the first full-day meeting on the rights of the child in March 2009, and where only a few member states referred to the girl child, 6 in fact. And the Human Rights Council has, I think, 48 members. 6 member states referred to the girl child, mostly in relation to education, violence, armed conflicts, and forced and early marriages. The other factor of invisibility of the adolescent girl is age. As you well know, the Convention on the Rights of the Child is clear in stating that a child means every human being below the age of 18 years unless, under the law applicable to the child, majority is attained earlier. Adolescence doesn't really exist in the letter of the CRC, albeit Articles 5 and 14, item 2, talk of the evolving capacities of the child in the context of the responsibilities of parents and of freedom of thought, respectively. That's the only time when the convention recognizes that children actually evolve obviously into adolescence and youth, but it doesn't state that explicitly. Though the concept of adolescence is a social construction which coincides historically with the emergence of secondary schooling, it is clear now that it is a stage in development in which, from a biological, sociological, psychological point of view, sexual maturity is achieved, self-identity and life projects are established, and social, though not necessarily economic, autonomy is obtained. Different definitions of adolescence and youth complicate matters, as we heard earlier on. A couple of years ago, when the Ibero-American Summit of Heads of State decided to devote its yearly gathering to young people, we reviewed the various definitions of adolescence and youth to point out precisely to the confusion that in ages, age brackets that went all the way from 10 to 35, as we just heard, which resulted, in fact, in the total invisibility of adolescence in public policy. Unfortunately, the conclusions of the summit were ambiguous on this point and reaffirmed basically what the youth organizations in the world, youth defined as 15 to 35 years of age, and I heard 37 today. So sticking to their definition and to their interests.